Every year, the number of foreigners moving to Korea is increasing. In 2000, there was a total of approximately 500,000 foreigners living in Korea. Today, that number has risen to over 2.5 million. So where exactly are most foreigners coming from, and what do they do here? The answer to these questions can be found using the immigration data provided by the Korean government. It's easy to categorize the foreigners here based on their visa type, so that's what I'll do. I won't be covering all visa types, but just those that are long-term and can impact Korea's demographic. Based on numbers, the largest visa type is F4, given to ethnic Koreans, the prodigal children coming back home. While technically they are foreigners too, I'm focusing on the visa types issued to foreigners based on work, education, or marriage. So I'm skipping F4 and moving on to the next on the list, E9, given to manual laborers, followed by F5, permanent residents, and then D2, international students. And those who marry Korean citizens next on the list, on F6. I'll finally finish the list with E7 for highly skilled workers and E2 for foreign language teachers. I'll start with the most vocal group online, English teachers on an E2 visa. E2 visas make up less than 1% of the foreigner population, and English teachers account for over 98% of all foreign language teachers. Back in 2005, John from New Brunswick, Canada, who worked as an English teacher in a cram school in Seoul, was paid 2.1 million Korean won, along with housing and return flight tickets. 20 years later, Christine from South Africa is paid more or less 2.5 million Korean won for the same job, a wage increase of 400,000 Korean won. Let's do some basic math using the South Korean Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index of 2005 is 74.41, while the CPI of 2025 is 116.61. Dividing gives a factor of 1.567. That 2.1 million Korean won from 2005 is valued at around 3.29 million in 2025. Christine isn't even getting the equivalent of what she might have been paid in 2005. What used to be an easy way to make some money while doing a fairly easy job before you went back home to find a real job is no more worthwhile. This is reflected in the substantial decline in the number of native English speakers, specifically men, coming to Korea. While the number of women from Asia has more than halved, and there's been some reduction in women coming in from North America, Australia, and New Zealand, there's been an increase in the number of women from Europe and a more than significant increase in the number of South African women coming in. The 2.5 million Korean won appears to remain an attractive proposition for South African women. Next, E9 visa for the silent laborers. Unless you live under a rock, you must have heard of Korea's existential birth crisis. In rural areas, there is a real shortage of, people. There are farms with no farmers, boats with no fishermen, and men with no women. I'll talk about the women later, but for now, sticking to the shortage of manual laborers. Since 2008, Korea has hired foreigners to work on farms, boats, factories, and construction sites. Most of these workers come from other Asian countries. Cambodia accounts for the most E9 visas, followed by Nepal, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, Philippines, and then the rest is primarily other Asian countries. There is a negligible amount of workers from other continents. So, are there any women on an E9 visa? Yes, there are. Cambodia has the most number of women laborers working in Korea, with 12,046, which is more than twice the next highest on the list, 5,102 Thai women. While the total number of manual laborers over the years alternate between 0 and 1 for North America and Oceania, the small number of workers from South America, Africa, and Europe keep getting smaller. Almost all manual laborers are from Asia, and that number keeps rising. E7 visa for the fancy jobs. Here's where the E7 workers are across Korea. But before we get to that, the E7, for skilled workers has multiple subdivisions. There's the E71 for professional, E72 for semi-professional, E73 for skilled, and E74 for a point-based system. Engineers, mechanics, sales reps, hotel receptionists, welders, software developers, all fall into one of the many subdivisions. Looking at the distribution of E7 workers across the country, it is not surprising to see most E7 workers in and around Seoul, where most Korean companies operate. And so, where are most E7 workers from? For simplicity's sake, I'll be looking at only E71 and E72. Vietnam provides the most amount of professionals, whereas China provides the most amount of semi-professionals, which is why, to no one's surprise, most E7 workers come from Asia. In fact, the number of workers from Asia have skyrocketed since COVID, and the next highest on the list is from North America.
스리랑카나 베트남이나 그쪽 젊은 처녀들 좀 수입잘 해갖고.
Today, with a little bit of money, any woman living in Seoul can walk out of a beauty clinic with a glass skin. But back in 2000, after toiling for hours in the sunlight, a woman's skin might have resembled more a shattered glass pane. As Korea economically progressed, the riches and glamour of Seoul meant more women left the unforgiving countryside, leaving behind men with fewer women. Thus began the rise of mail-order brides and F6 visa in Korea. Unregulated marriage brokers popped up all over the country. The ratio of Korean men to Korean women marrying foreign nationals is approximately 3-to-1. The numbers peaked in 2005. Soon, the Korean government enacted the Marriage Brokerage Regulation Act, after which the numbers dropped significantly. Most of the women marrying Korean men were Chinese Koreans. Love needs no language wasn't particularly true in this case. Chinese Koreans were more sought after because mostly they all spoke Korean. It still was no guarantee for a happily ever after. 4 years. It appears 3 to 4 years was the tolerable time frame before 1/4 called it quits. Aided by Instagram, Netflix, and TikTok, K-pop and K-drama have never had more of a reach globally than they do now. And with that, a rise in interest in everything Korean, including Korean men and women. Mail-order brides from Asia still account for a large number of the F6 visas. But excluding Asians, what was once dominated by passport bros coming to Korea to marry Korean women is seeing a change in now women from certain countries flocking to Korea to marry Korean men. Next, the D2 visa for students. Of the 36,000-odd students who graduated in 2024, roughly 15,000 stayed back in Korea looking for jobs, of which 1/3 found themselves a job. Most students were primarily in humanities and social sciences at 48.1%, followed by Korean language at 24.7% and engineering at 13%. Unsurprisingly, more than half the students were undergraduates. And where did most students come from? China tops the list, followed by Vietnam and then Mongolia. While there isn't enough data to reliably determine how many graduates in the social sciences, language studies, or engineering found jobs in their respective fields, not everyone can or will find employment in Korea. The demand for foreigners is limited to mostly manual laborers. As of May 2024, the total number of skilled workers in Korea, that is, combining E1 to E7, totals 65,000. But the number of those on an E9 exceeds 300,000. Finding a job in Korea beyond the skills acquired from an institution also requires that you speak Korean fluently, unless the specific industry doesn't have enough local workers. Nevertheless, the number of students coming to Korea has seen a steady increase over the years. Among Asian students, there are more women than men coming to Korea. The pattern is the same among Europeans, too. In fact, the number of women is almost double that of men. It's the same among the Americas as well, more women than men coming to Korea for their studies. The exception being Africa, more African men than women. And I don't believe it's just a coincidence, but data shows that K-pop and K-dramas is more popular in the Americas and Europe in comparison to Africa. Most foreigners who stay in Korea long term aspire to get permanent residency. And there are multiple pathways to the Promised Land. But almost all pathways require aspirants to go through a Korean Immigration and Integration Program. This is a program implemented by the Korean government to ensure foreigners are given the tools to integrate with the Korean society. This visa type is seeing a consistent increase over the last decade across both genders, with the numbers set to keep rising. Korea is predominantly an atheist society, a conservative society. But with more foreigners from across the globe coming in, how will it change over time? Time will tell.